Farm4Profit podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm4Profit podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm4Profit podcast.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the Farm4Profit podcast. I don't know if I've ever sat this close to you before, Corey.
Yeah, and after the ice cube incident yesterday, I don't know that I want to be this close to you. Did you see that, Dave? Just wait till you get yours.
No comment. I thought you were going to say, yeah, you're going to give Dave. Yeah, give it to Dave. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate you. We're hanging out here in the studio recording content ahead of time just to make sure that you've got some of the best content while you have extra hours in the cab so we can bring value there and you can keep learning to make your farm more profitable, which right now, Corey, seems like it's not as easy as a task as it used to be.
Exactly. Which one of these do I want?
Oh, boy. You got tough decisions even in studio before we go. So this one here clearly is going to play a game, so you want the one that's in your left hand.
Clearly.
As
I don't have my way around your outlines there, Tanner.
I like this. This is going to be a lot of fun. You're hot here.
I'm hot. Well, it's because it's a new headset. You don't have me calibrated.
That's right. But we're going to have a conversation today that could be one of the largest one-time ROI per acre as far as dollar return.
Dollar return.
Yeah.
Dollar saved.
We talked about, up until probably this conversation, drainage tile being one of the best investments to see an immediate payback.
Yep.
And then we had a couple of other conversations that rivaled that. But I think today, for those of you that are buying and owning farm ground as an asset, we're going to learn a lot about a way to get a little money back.
Yeah.
And we've got some personal experience, or at least in the process, sitting in the room. And we've got a couple of experts here to feed into this. So let's get into introducing you to our guests today. Going to start off with Tyler. Tyler Brock, welcome to Studio 205, Farm4Profit podcast. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having us out.
I can't believe your wife let you out of the house because you've got a newborn.
3-week-old. Yeah.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe you're glad to be out of the
I
house.
actually got a nap on the way over, so it was good.
Some sleep.
And he's been gone the rest of the week, too.
Yeah, I just got back, so the nap over was much needed.
No, that's exciting. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into the company here in a little bit once we finish introductions.
Sure. So I grew up on a farm in northwest Iowa, went to Iowa State, which is where I met my wife. Typical corn and soybean farm there. Went to school early 2000s, sub $1.80 corn, wasn't a lot of money to be made back on the farm, and had a desire to learn and do some different things. So we spent some time in South America from an agricultural standpoint, farming there, and then I've done a lot of consulting through that around the world. So we've been in 15 different countries and 4 different continents consulting on ag projects, from NGOs, private wealth, governments looking at food security, really looking at it from a farm expertise level, where you take some places like Ghana, Africa, or Gambia, where it's a small country. They have a lot of food insecurity issues. They have a lot of resources naturally, but they don't really know what to do with them. So we were brought in a lot of different projects and looked at what they had, what their problems were, how could we provide a solution to those problems through things that we've learned. Agriculture in the United States has always been on the forefront from a technology and a learning standpoint. And we're able to take some of that knowledge and help some of these countries around the world. And then in addition from that...
So you did this right after school?
Yeah. So after 10 years out of school, pretty much have been anywhere and everywhere around the globe doing a lot of that work. And also when you do some of those things, you learn different things wherever. Then you're like, that's an interesting idea on how maybe that could apply back here or something along that line. And got a chance to spend a lot of time working with some of the top soil scientists in the world that have seen different soils on different places across the planet and learning what makes all those things click. So vast amount of knowledge and things learned. Then after that, we did a bunch of work similar on some consulting projects in the U.S., so Florida, Texas, the Delta. And a lot of that kind of plays back into our our family operation, which my wife and I have now in central Nebraska, where we have 3,000 acres of certified food grade organic crops. So everything we grow today ends up either in a bag of chips, beans that are ended up processed and go to Japan for tofu, food grade wheat that ends up in a pasta or something along those natures, or along that line. So again, a lot of different things that we got to learn along the way. It's been a lot of fun.
I think that's the first time we've had somebody on here that's food grade organic.
Yeah.
We've had organic growers on before, but besides,
Well, maybe we just didn't talk about that
didn't
part.
get that deep into it.
The last guy we had on was growing peas for
Well, peas.
That's
Yep.
true.
Yeah.
Peas and sweet corn.
Yep.
That's right. But you brought a partner in crime, so why don't you take a chance to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, so my name is Bryce Rolbeck, and my story is similar to Tyler's, just 10 years newer. I grew up in western Iowa on a small corn and soybean farm. Went to Iowa State. At Iowa State, right after Iowa State, I went to Brazil for a semester in college. Did that. Ended up staying for a while, making good friends down there and working on a farm with a guy called Marcelo. And me and him are still best friends. I go back about once a year, go visit his farm, talk to him about it on a weekly basis, understand what's going on in Brazil. So I spent about 6 months in Brazil, traveling around, learning agriculture, going to college, meeting people, meeting friends that have really lasted a lifetime. Then after that, I actually went to Tanzania, Africa. And there we did consulting on a 12,000-acre rice farm. And that was in the Kilimanjaro region, which is the southwest region. And there's no roads in there. It was all train or airplane. Spent about 6 months there just working through a cropping season of rice, corn, beans. These people had never seen a combine prior to this coming in, much less a car. So it was a learning experience going down to Africa and doing that consulting gig. And then we came back here and we started a company. Actually, this is when Tyler and I first met. We started a company called AgriSecure that got into the organic space. So we built a software that digitalized the organic paperwork and sold that part of that to FBN and went through that, and that's where we both converted our farm. So we farm about 8,000 acres in Nebraska. That is alfalfa, organic corn, wheat, all food grade, pelletized alfalfa for dog food, food grade stuff. And then we also farm in Iowa as well, and that is all for a chip company called Zach's Mighty. So all organic corn gets harvested, it gets cleaned, it gets put in a 50-pound bag, goes down to Phoenix, gets made into a chip, and then gets distributed around the country. So we're helping build that brand out, do that on our farm. And during that, we decided that we found a good niche in Boa Safra that Tyler and I both decided could really help farmers when we did in 2018 on our farm. Saved us a bunch of tax money and decided to build that process. So, yep, that's the chip right there.
Zach's Mighty.
Are you Cody's brother?
Cody.
Cody Earlbeck?
Nope.
Oh, with Earlbeck. Okay.
There's a lot of Earlbecks.
There's a lot of Earlbecks.
You know
just-
Jesse Earlbeck?
I know those guys, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
He likes to have a good time.
He likes to have a good time.
Yeah.
He sells Hogemeyer with me, and I have to go down on the trip with him sometimes. Sometimes I got to stay away from Jesse because we're bad together.
So these chips are very interesting because
Chili, lime.
This
What was
is
that
right
other
up
one?
your alley there, Corey.
they hold 3.8 ounces of guacamole. We raise Indian corn. It's a 12 to 13% protein, where most of our corn is 6 to 7. We do about 60 bushels, but that's what makes the strength of that chip.
So you guys both came from farming backgrounds then?
Yep.
So when you
sorts, your
say it
family.
can hold that many ounces, like you can dip that many ounces.
Yes.
It won't break.
Won't break.
That's your
It's a
claim to
hearty
fame.
chip.
I have a feeling if I ate these chips, my wife would be chewing my ass because of how loud the crunch is.
Oh, yeah. Your jaw gets tired.
Yeah, you're-
I'll send you guys some. We'll have them sent to the
Yeah,
office.
Fiery nacho.
Maybe you don't have to
roll.
eat the whole bag to get full.
Here. You don't. You don't.
Oh, nice.
funny.
Yes, we definitely need to try some of these chips.
Sorry to cut you off, Dave.
no, you're good.
Go ahead.
I just hearing a ton of background in agriculture before they started. Both get some schooling, and then you guys both decided to go out of country of sorts. Were you together when you went out of country, or were you both went separately out of country just to learn more? What was the go out of country portion for?
I think just to realize that there's a pretty big world out there, and ag is obviously a huge component of it. And, it was a little bit of the pioneer spirit. Like, hey, I can always come back and farm, but when you're looking at sub $1.80 corn back then, it's like, do I really want to come back right now? Maybe I can go learn something else or see something else.
Gotcha.
So it was more or less, let's just go learn and do something different, and that's kind of how it all started.
Then I heard serial entrepreneurship, in that you guys made something already, that you digitized some way of doing something and sold that business off already. So you've been multi-time business owners?
Yeah, I'd say
Correct.
that's accurate.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
That's a pretty modest answer.
That's a pretty
That company wasn't this huge success or anything like that. It was a nice learning experience for us, and as learning about building a business and propelling us forward. So I don't want to make that mistake. It was a huge success.
Oh,
We
we'll
are
tell
gonna-
them. All listeners, huge success.
We are going to dive deep into that stuff. But this show is actually about Boa Safra. Is that how you say it? Boa Safra?
That's right.
What the heck is Boa Safra?
When-
What does that mean?
When I got your first email, I was calling it Boa Safra because I didn't know where to break up
See,
the
I
letters.
call it Boa Safra. I
think I said
my wife's
Boa
like, it's not
Sofra.
that. It's not that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just due to both of our experience in South America. We speak Portuguese fluently, so does Bryce speaks English fluently, so works out.
That's true.
It works out.
You translate for each other.
That's right. Boa Safra just stands for good harvesting in Brazil, and when we started this business thinking about harvesting, and I think our topic today will kind of will tie into what we mean by that. So that's kind of how the name came, and I think it ties into what we talk about today a lot with the company Boa Safra, and that is harvesting hidden tax deductions. And so there's a lot of ways to make money in ag. A lot of us think about it. It's planting a crop and harvesting it and generating a hopefully some years a profitable year, and that's your harvesting profitability. But there's also another way to look at different things within ag that make money that are not traditional and that are less conventional. And that's what we came up with Boa Safra, is looking at harvesting those hidden deductions and how that relates to profitability back to the farm, that a lot of people probably haven't thought about it from that angle. And us having the experience of doing different things where you're always challenged to look at different problems and figure out different solutions. When we came up with this, as we get into it, we realized there's a huge opportunity here that most people are just unaware of. So if you dive in a little bit, what we do today as a company is we help folks that have purchased farmland or inherited farmland take a tax deduction on that asset.
So let me stop you for just 1 second. For every kid that comes up to me, because I sell farmland, and says, how do these guys afford it? Pay attention from this point forward in the podcast.
Yep.
Because there's more than one way to skin a cat, and we're going to talk about those other ways.
Yep.
That's right. So that's perfect. Let's just go back to 1960 when Congress passed a law that said when you acquire farmland via purchasing or inheriting, the fertility in the soil that you're acquiring with that asset can be treated as a separate asset class and taken as a depreciation or a deduction off of your income. So if you think about buying a farm that's been pattern tiled, you guys were talking about, hey, tiles, great return on your investment. If you sell a farm today that's been pattern tiled and I buy it, I can go and put a value on what that tile is and take that as a write-off on my taxes. Same thing as with the farm that's got a well and a pivot on it, separate assets, fence as well, terraces. Well, now I buy a farm, and in that farm, there's fertility that's been there, that's built up. It's been built up over a long time. When I buy that farm, of that asset, a lot of it's dirt, but a lot of it's fertility. And what we do as a company is we come in and determine what is that plant available fertility, what that number equates to, and we do a lot of work through soil testing to figure out what that number is, obviously, and there's a lot that goes into it. But on average, in the United States, our national average tax deduction is around $1,700 per acre.
What?
So let's just take a $10,000 an acre farm. Okay, how did you buy that? Well, if you take $1,700 per acre off of your taxes as a tax deduction, that's a pretty big discount to that asset value, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say, for easy math, it's a $1,500 deduction, and you're in a 30% tax bracket. That's $500 an acre. So if you bought that farm for $10,000 an acre, a cash savings to you is $500. You effectively just bought it for $9,500. That's a pretty big discount when you're starting to talk about how many dollars it takes to buy anything nowadays.
Right.
So the math really works that way. Is you bought an asset. Farmers, and we can say this because we are them, are notorious for at the end of the year purchasing things they maybe don't necessarily need because they're looking at a tax liability they don't know how to get out of. So they roll into new equipment, they roll into things they necessarily don't need. They're prepaying expenses, etc. That's all great when interest is 2%. When it's 9%, now your biggest line item starts to become operating interest and things of that nature.
Yep.
And the greatest expense anybody will have in their life over the course of business, whether you're in ag or not, is usually taxes. It's the greatest line item you're going to ever have. It's reoccurring every year, and you're always going to get stuck with it.
Yep.
So now you take somebody that comes to the end of the year, and they've purchased land in the last 15 years, because we can go from 2010 forward on this, that's been sitting on an asset, and they didn't realize that they could take a deduction against it. So now all of a sudden, you don't have to go buy that piece of equipment or prepay expenses. You can take income in because now you got an offset to manage that income in and take a deduction against it. It's a pretty big game-changing deduction.
So if you're saying, and I'll let you get into this, you're saying if I've bought a farm since 2010, I can go back and do this?
Yeah, so the way it works is the IRS allows you to catch up missed depreciation. So if Corey bought a tractor 5 years ago that he forgot to depreciate, let's just say it's a $500,000 tractor, and he forgot to depreciate it, he's legal. Yeah, it's an oopsie. Oopsie.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
That happens. He's allowed to file a form with the IRS that says, hey, I screwed up. I bought this asset and I didn't depreciate it. I'm allowed to bring that depreciation forward and take that right off. Ground that you bought in the last 15 years that you did not take this on because you didn't know you could, because you just didn't have the knowledge that you could, and there wasn't anybody that had put together a professionalized process that went through all the checks that you need to do to take advantage of this, because you didn't know you could do it, you're allowed to file that same form. We do the work to come up with what that number is through a verified third-party, non-biased report and come up with what that number is. You're allowed to take that value from 10 years ago on that farm you bought and pull that forward to the current tax year.
So you were going to add something to it, Bryce.
Yeah, I think we focused a lot on farmland, but farmland means any agriculture land that is utilized for agriculture and nutrients are coming off of it. So we've done almonds, we've done pasture, we've done citrus and all that stuff.
Rangeland.
Rangeland. So we don't want to make that appearance that it's just row crop ground in the Midwest.
What about if you just own the side of a mountain that you don't do anything with?
You have to use it for agriculture.
You have to use it for agriculture.
Yep.
Well, if you got mountain goats,
Mountain goats.
Cow calves, a lot of guys are cow calves.
Can hunting be considered agriculture?
No.
I hunt.
half our audience.
Fishing.
What if there's gold in them there hills?
There you
can
go.
write that
But
off.
I mean, I was just going to say, throw in there that when I purchased my land, someone was like, oh, you must have made a lot of money last year. You needed a write-off. It's like, well, no, I can't
you
write
don't
off
get to.
the purchase of the land. But
The only
this
thing you get to
is something-
depreciate is the interest on the loan.
The interest
maybe,
on the
you know,
loan.
so if you're borrowing money, then you get,
And now
This.
your bank of nutrients that are in the
right.
ground.
Yeah, so if you think about it that way, you got to take that deduction. That's a pretty sizable thing.
Yeah.
Most people are buying ground because of other reasons, but this is another obviously very nice value add that you get to add to that and take the deduction. And the process typically takes us 60 days from start to finish. We have soil sampling crews all over the country. We're in all 48 states working. A lot of the crews are directly for us or subs for us that follow our protocol and go out and do everything. And when we get done, that data goes back to you as a landowner. So that's a cost that you save. And we charge a flat rate because we are truly a non-biased third party, which is part of the requirement needed to do this. Because if we were charging you a percentage of your deduction,
That's right.
oh, we'd want a bigger value out there, right?
Yeah.
Is that really non-biased? No. So we charge a flat rate, which costs $40 an acre. Now, our $40 an acre is actually a tax deduction, so it's effectively like $26.
Corey, every time I sell
Seriously.
your land, my commission, the more I charge, the less taxes you have to pay.
That's what
That's how you got to think about it.
Yep.
I'm
So
lowering
that-
your tax liability.
That brings up a couple. I got so many questions. So first of all, you introduced this as a hidden deduction.
Right.
And when you say it's a hidden deduction, that almost feels shady.
Sure.
Is there anything shady about this?
It's tax code. So here's the thing. Tax code that's been there for 64 years. You know, people today, we get this question a lot like, well, it sounds too good to be true. It usually is. Great. I get it. The same thing is if I buy a $500,000 tractor and I'm allowed to elect bonus depreciation and write it all off, it's still a $500,000 tractor, but on paper it's worth nothing because I just depreciated it to zero.
Yeah.
Right.
To people that aren't in ag and you tell them you can do that, they're like, dude, seriously? That sounds shady to me. We all know Section 179 has been around since the beginning of time in agriculture. Section 180 sits right next to 179, and it is largely fallen on deaf ears. Part of the reason is land for the first 50 years since this code has been around. I mean, in the 2000s, land was $2,000 an acre in Iowa. There wasn't a lot there to actually go out and get, and fertility values were extremely low, right? We've seen fertility values go berserk over the last half dozen years.
The value of the
Cost of fertility.
right? Not
Right.
the value that's in the ground.
Right. So we're going out and taking essentially an appraisal of what's there, and we're going to use what the current market value is during the month that asset was acquired. So if you bought ground 3 years ago in the peak of COVID, for example, and everything was berserk, it's got a really high value to it.
Oh.
You know, if we had
It goes back to that.
Goes to the
So kind of like
fertilizer.
date of death, valuation on a farm. They're doing date of purchase versus.
So what's setting that value? Is there like a Chicago Board of Trade?
So
for that?
we have a local, regional, and a national price index that we follow. So you bought your farm in
2019.
Midwest Iowa. We're going to look at what was all of those nutrient values off a local, a regional, and a national index and come up with a value based on those three metrics to come up so we can tie it to that. So if somebody comes in and says, well, how'd you come up with $1,500? We know there's this much calcium, this much phosphorus. This was the values of them, et cetera, and it all rolls up into a number. And we backstop that as part of our report to give you that data so it's indisputable what our numbers are. Agronomy at the end of the day is math, right?
Right.
So we built out ours so our math is black and white of how we've come to that. So it's really indisputable that we could say, hey, there's $1,500. We know it's $1,500.
It's like Dave doing an appraisal on farm ground. You have to have your comparables, and you're putting your market factors in, your interest rate. You put all these factors in to say this is what your farm's worth today.
Yeah, correct. And
if you call me a year from now, not the same.
Yeah, and oftentimes people even call and they'll say, hey, Grandma passed last July. Can you give us what it was worth last July? And in the tax code part of that, that's called your basis. And so they're figuring the difference for capital gain on their basis versus the relinquished price the day they sell it.
Mm-hmm. So does this affect the basis if I go to sell my farm? I've done this, and I get an opportunity I wasn't expecting, and I go to sell this farm.
Yeah. The value comes off, the deduction comes off your basis. So you take that $10,000 example at $1,500. We'll go with that. Your basis now is $8,500. You go sell it for $12,000 instead of having a $2,000 cap from 10 to 12. You now have you have a $3,500 cap from 8,500 to 12.
Yeah.
Really irrelevant if you're going to go 1031 into something else.
Yep.
Most people buy ground and hold it until they die, and then their kids get a stepped up in basis, in which they're allowed to do it again because the basis changed. Mm-hmm. So anytime there's a change in basis, you can do it, which we say, purchase.
Well, the kids can do it again.
Sure, step up in basis is change ownership.
So can I do this on ground that I bought from my dad?
If you bought it from him and the basis changed, yes.
The only reason you're asking that is because you can't 1031 from your dad.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
If you're gifted it, you cannot.
But if you
Because
buy
there's
it,
no change in basis if he gives it to you.
so it has to be purchased for higher than what they
Right.
bought it for. Can't be
Yeah.
purchased for $1.
Correct.
Unless he paid 50 cents.
Right.
So is there we're depreciating the asset over time. So like 179 deduction, we depreciate bonus depreciation all in 1 year. And then we have recapture tax when we recapture if we sell that asset and we don't 1031 it down the road. Is there we probably have a recapture if we're to sell it within a day or a month or a week or a year or 2 years. Is there a time of when we lose that recapture? Is it 30-year time frame and then we've depreciated the full asset, or how's that work?
A lot of people would say, the CPA world would say that after 10 years, essentially that nutrient value would have been fully depleted out. So your recapture is Very little, if
Very
any,
little.
at that point. If you buy it today and go flip it tomorrow,
Yeah.
you're going to recapture
You're
it all
gonna-
back, and it's irrelevant. But the argument to that is, too, so you have recapture, right? Well, time value of money is a pretty important thing,
Yep.
right? So you're going to go buy this and flip it and sell it in 7 years and have a recapture or a capital gain step up, but you effectively just had 7 years of utilizing that deductional cash versus doing it tomorrow. And there's a big value to that, obviously.
Yeah. So you said the average is $1,700 an acre. Here in Iowa, we have heavy black soil, high CECs that can hold a lot of nutrients.
What's
There's
the
over-
CEC?
Cation exchange
Yeah,
capacity.
yeah, there you go. Cation exchange capacity. Yeah, Dr. Manu at Iowa State would kick me for not having that right there. But okay, an acre furrow slice is just over 2 million pounds of soil. You start talking 200 parts per million and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot, and then you start getting into like the micronutrients. There's a ton. Is there a cap on what you can get?
So you brought up an interesting point. When you talk 2 million pounds, you're really talking that top 6.7 inches,
Yeah.
acre furrow slice.
Yeah.
You know, what we measure is our aerobic zone, which is that top 6 3/4 inches, because there's enough oxygen to support microbes. Microbes break down inorganic fertilities, excrete enzyme, plant roots take them up. That's essentially how that 98% of your nutrient uptake is in that top 6 3/4 inches. We do work where we do deeper cores, measuring below that aerobic zone, and that number is usually 4 to 5x. So if you have $1,500 on the top, you may have $5,000 in that next profile.
But can we depreciate that?
But we know from an agronomic standpoint, the only thing you're really taking up from deep is typically water soluble, maybe nitrogen, maybe sulfur, and those aren't things that you're going to build over time like you would P and K. So those don't even make it into our equational report as a deducting value because it's not something you're going to build. We don't take that as a depreciation as well because we want to measure what we know is plant available. It's going to be uptaken, used, and exported off the field effectively. From an agronomic standpoint, I know that something that's at 18 inches in the profile isn't going anywhere. That plant's not taking it up, so it's not being exported. Consequently, it's not being depleted. So we don't measure that. We're just measuring that top slice. And you said, hey, Iowa, heavy muck ground, better. Yeah, we find spots where the numbers are $2,500 an acre or $3,000.
Really?
But then we take spots in the southeast where they may get 80 inches of rainfall on sand, and it's obviously a lot lower because you have natural leaching, et cetera.
Can you do this with, like, if someone had sand or aggregate underneath? Obviously not Boa Safra, but can you write that off?
Sure, mineral depletion.
Mineral.
Yeah.
Okay.
611 under the tax code is depletion like oil and gas wells. If you got a farm, you take gravel off of it, you're exporting that out, it's a mineral depletion.
So,
wonder if
But if you
Bergen
don't
does that.
take it out,
No, if you're not taking it out, it's not going anywhere.
okay.
I wonder if Bergen does that with his sand over there in Grand Island.
oh, maybe.
No, it's not sand that he's selling clay
Yeah.
Oh,
because
it's clay.
because Grand Island's an island of sand and they need the clay to build on.
We'll have to send him this episode.
Yeah.
You can talk to his CPA.
Back to Tanner's question. So I was selling farm ground. This gentleman lives just down the road, just this way right here. And he was telling me, past banker, he's like, Dave, I've been doing this. I've been writing off nutrient. You got to do this. You got to do this. So I asked my tax accountant, and she's like, yeah, I've heard of that. I don't know. It kind of give me the, I don't think so. I'm guessing that this isn't something that goes out to every CPA that they learn. Maybe they should learn it. I don't know.
It's not new. It's from
know.
1960.
I was
whatever.
surprised that she didn't know anything about it, and she does a lot of agriculture clients, and so that put me on point because she's my trusted advisor to ask, like, is this snake oil, or what is it? What do you tell the audience for that?
Well, look, it's been around for a really long time. So unless you were alive in 1960 as a CPA and nobody has done this, it's not something like Section 179 that everybody does and is accustomed to. B, there is a criteria that you have to follow and a lot of boxes you have to check to be able to take that deduction. Nobody went out and built a professionalized system around that to come and give you a report. So your CPA would look at it and be like, okay, well, this isn't Joe's Agronomy that just wrote. Sorry if there's Joe's Agronomy.
Yeah, they're actually sponsored.
Yeah.
So I think the other aspect of Boa Safra is we have CPAs on staff, very high level people that You call in and say, hey, my accountant isn't up for this. And they say, oh, yeah, we run into that a lot. And say, let's set up a meeting with them. We'll have the CPAs get on, go through it, have them read the code before it, jump on a call. You guys talk it out. We know soils. They know the accounting stuff. Probably batting 99 out of 100 on that.
I got you.
Yeah, just to add on to that, at the end of the day, here's our disclaimer. We are not CPAs. We as a company do not say, Corey, this is how you should go file your taxes, and this is what you should do. What we're providing you is that information so your CPA can go make an informed decision however you see fit. We never say, well, Tanner, you should go do it this way, and this is where you're going to go file it. Our CPAs will tell your CPA, this is where it would be filed on a tax return. This is how it works. But if you ultimately decide to do it one way or another after you have our information, that's on you, because that's not what we do. We just get that underlying information so you can make that informed decision.
Guys, I've even thought about this like Section 1031. So everybody in trade and farmland seems to know about 1031 tax deferred exchange, or pushing the cart down the road. But there's even separate firms. My normal accountant maybe knows what 1031 is, but do they know all the rules? And what if I wanted to cash out so much? And what can I do it from family member to family member? And how many generations do I have to be removed? And there's a lot of nuances to it. So I normally refer my people to a company down in Des Moines that specifically does nothing but 1031 tax deferred exchanges, and then they become a qualified intermediary is the name. I don't know if there's like a middleman. There isn't a 1031 that's called a QI, qualified intermediary. Is there a middleman when it comes to this with Section 180?
That's technically these guys.
It's us.
That's you guys.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
You're the QI for.
And you're talking IPE 1031 down in Des Moines. My gosh, they do a great job.
They're good. I was no free ads, but yeah,
I will.
that's where I was going. But I would throw them out there too. They're good.
So this is interesting, though, when you're talking about your line of business, Dave. Should you be calling Boa Safra?
Yep.
I like saying Safra. That's just the way it's like soak up and
Suck up. Yeah.
Suck up.
Should you be calling these guys before you have a land sale and advertising that this carries a $1,600 an acre value that could potentially save to maybe raise the value of your sale?
Well, and I've had other wealth management companies and some larger investor buyers ask me about it. So I've got more involved, and that's the reason I wanted to get even more involved, is so that I can make that recommendation based on personal experience.
If you have soil samples, recent soil samples, you could actually advertise what is there.
Yeah, so our process is to do it A to Z on our end, kind of complete. Now, if we have somebody call up and say, hey, I bought a farm and I got it polled, I got a grid sampled, and I did a micro and macro pack, and I have everything we need, and we have the depths, and we have everything, we could just utilize those because they went through a qualified third-party lab. And, the reason that if somebody says, hey, I bought a quarter and I had a grid sample, that's great. If they say I bought a quarter and I have 2 samples, well, they probably pulled them from the old manure pile, and their numbers are not going to be justifiable. So in a lot of cases, most people want us to come in and do it. Now, we can utilize them, like I just said, but also it's part of that backstopping defendability of it. Like, hey, we got a geo-reference pin to everywhere the sample came off of Corey's farm. We could go back to there if we had to and prove that was a
But $40 an acre, if you could get your sellers convinced to pay that before they sell and know what it is, and you could literally market.
We're $1,700 an acre.
It's $1,700 an acre off the top. You're going to get more than $40 in another bid.
Just like tile maps. If I know you have guaranteed tile maps in there, then they know that there's 28,000 feet of tile on here. They've kind of already got it down. So normally my farms sell for $1,000 better if I have pattern tile maps on them.
Well,
Just tile maps in
I was
general.
going to say it costs you $1,200 an acre to tile it. So yeah.
Yep. But what he was saying there, what Tyler was just saying is why I choose IPE down in Des Moines. I go to the experts. I'm guessing you can do this yourself. If you knew what nutrient values were, you could probably write it up and send it yourself. But I would think people would want a qualified intermediary, somebody to kind of handle that for them.
It's probably like filing your taxes. I could file my taxes myself, but
it's
I feel a lot better.
So
if
not
CPA
technically
does
on
it.
this. It's supposed to be a qualified third-party expert.
Okay.
Is it?
It actually says that in the section
That's
180.
actually in the code. And think about this: if you allowed every farmer to go out and come up with their own nutrient value, it would not be what our national average is. It'd be 4 times that, because they're obviously going to go pad that a little bit.
Do you guys think AI is a qualified in the
No.
code?
But
the reason I asked is-
technically they could, though, because they could hire a third-party lab and someone to sample it, and they could have another CPA or whatever, bring it in. It would just be very cumbersome.
Technically, what we have found, and we've had other people come to us and say, "Hey, I had back to Joe's agronomy.
Yeah.
He did it." Problem is, Joe's agronomy is a crop scout, a fertility, doing prescriptions, making seed recommendations, doing 12 other things, and he does 2 of these a year. Okay? Does your CPA want to sign off on something for a massive tax deduction, knowing that if there's an issue, Joe's agronomy is going to be
Gone.
by and not there? So most people that we've had come to us be like, "Hey, I had so-and-so do this." 2 things they find out. One, obviously, we're there with CPAs that help handhold, and we've spent a ton of money to figure out this process. And B, the value that we find typically far and away pays for what Joe's agronomy did, because Joe doesn't know what values I'm taking, what price index I should be actually utilizing. Did I utilize enough of this to allocate these values, et cetera? So in most cases, when we've had clients call us up and be like, "Hey, I hired Joe's come and do this, but I actually want to have you guys just come and do it. I'll eat that cost because I feel way more comfortable. And I took Joe's report to my CPA, and they said, yeah, we're not signing off on that."
So
Hold on. I want to get into the process. So
Yeah.
I want Bryce.
Go through it.
We got a listener that is like, "Oh, light bulb moment. I got a couple of sections that I've bought in the last 10 years. What's that look like? How do they start? How do you get them through it?"
Yeah, so first of all, we get a call, and we get probably 20, 30 calls a day. So it's quite a bit, but they call in, and we talk them through the scenarios that we just spent the last 15 minutes talking about, and they decide they want to go further, and we say, "Great, talk to your CPA. If they have any questions, we'll jump on and make sure everybody's on board on this, what's going on, what's going to happen, how it's going to end, and how it's going to look for you." They get the CPA's approval. We go through the process, so they sign up, get us their information such as fields, locations, purchase date, all that stuff, how it was purchased.
Which is all, so we just send them a link via email. It takes right to our submittal page.
Okay.
And it just asks those simple questions that we need. Sorry.
Yep. No, go ahead. You're good. So we get all that information in. We'll send out the crews to go soil sample it in our process of soil sampling, doing the short cores and deep cores. And then we come through and get that data, and we have a team that will analyze it for that location and build it into a report that has all the data and information that backs it up. And that report will get sent to the customer, and if they request a CPA will get that report. It'll have the value per acre and the overall value that CPA can utilize, along with all the backing details to be able to if there was an audit, say, hey, this is where that number came from. So it's much like a receipt in a way. Yep.
You left out one part, though.
Go ahead, Tyler.
So, no, when they sign up, we get in their base data. We're going to map out their property based on their legals, and that comes. An agreement comes back to you via DocuSign. Your information's right. The field maps and the borders are right in that DocuSign that require you to click and make sure that you acknowledge that everything we have is accurate. So there's no, hey, you sampled the wrong quarter. There's no way that happens. And then we go through the whole process as Bryce described. And if it's under 160 acres, we just charge 100% of the value at the end when we deliver you a report. And if it's over 160 acres, we charge 1/3 down and 2/3 when we complete.
Okay. Is there a minimum requirement for grid samples? 2.5 acre grids, 4, 10, zone sampling? How's that work?
Yeah, we could do zones. I mean, we need a lot of data. You know, if somebody says, hey, I do everything on 5 acre grids, we can work off 5 acre grids. Or we want 2.5, we'll do 2.5s. Zones, we can do zones as well. You know, we need to make sure that when we get that data in, we've got a broad range of data. So if the old 3 acres over there where there used to be a cattle lot's going to have 1,000 ppms of phosphorus, obviously that's not represented across the whole farm, and you're going to take an average over everything. So that's why we got to get a lot of kind of data points and polls.
Yep.
What if I bought a farm on contract?
Doesn't matter.
Still counts.
Sure.
What is the largest amount that you guys have had the opportunity to write off? I mean, if I got 5,000 acres times 1,700 an acre, and I just heard about this, and I'm a large BTO, I'm going to say,
BTO.
and I go back, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's $8 million worth of value that I could go back against in the last 10 years. Is that like realistic numbers that you guys are hitting, or?
Yeah.
And
So I mean,
I got to imagine that throws a red flag at the IRS. Hey, Corey, I'm going to write off $8 million this year.
This is how.
Hey, you got to make $8 million to write
Yeah,
$8 million.
that's true. You see what I'm saying, though?
so your scenario is correct.
Okay.
Now, in that situation, you may say, hey, I need $800,000 a year for the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
I don't need $8 million in 1 year because I didn't make $8 million. So you can amortize that out and set a schedule. Section 180 allows you to take 100% of the deduction in the year the asset was acquired.
Okay.
No questions asked. If you bought it prior to that, then you're going to set that on an amortization schedule. Now, that may be a 3-year schedule, a 5-year schedule, a 7-year schedule, but you're going to set a schedule based off of that information.
Okay.
This is how Bill Gates is buying all of his land.
Nah.
Man needs the write-off.
So I've heard of this just because I'm in this realm, but I don't. Everyone I talk to, there's a lot of people that don't. I mean, what do you think the adoption rate is?
So the adoption rate's really good when you can get a chance to tell somebody
Talk
about
to
it.
them.
Yeah.
Get in front of them. Yeah.
Nobody enjoys paying. You know, we always use the joke that we're all required to pay taxes, but nobody says you have to leave a tip.
Yeah.
And the way you don't leave a tip is the tax code is 74,608 pages long. That's our guide as individual taxpayers and citizens to follow what the code allows us to deduct, to expense, to amortize, etc. That's our guide on how, and obviously average farmer doesn't know that, but our CPAs do. That's our kind of our guide to figure out what we have to pay and not. So when it's in there, you're allowed to utilize that. And the average person that doesn't know about this today, when they do find out about it, says, well, why won't I utilize that? Why not? So the adoption rate is really high when you get a chance to get it in front of somebody. You know, if you just read about this in a flash, hey, I saw this thing, you'd be like, well, shit, I've been farming for 60 years. I've never heard about this. Can't be. But once you get it explained, your CPA gets on with our CPAs, and they understand it from that level, the adoption rate's pretty high.
But you think, is it less than 10% of farm purchasers right now in this last year?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
You got a lot of ground to make up.
So there is a significant amount of taxes that are
That
being
just
left on the
made-
table.
That just made listening to Farm4Profit extremely valuable.
Profitable, even.
I mean, legitimately, like we have, we probably have 60% of all farmers listen to us.
Exactly.
But even then, our audience is such a small fragment of agriculture.
And this is only, well, yeah, it'd be the U.S. tax code. So anywhere outside for our outside listeners. Is there anything in other countries that is the same?
If they pay U.S. taxes and they own assets outside the U.S. but pay U.S. taxes, you're allowed to do it.
Huh.
Interesting.
So you could own a farm in South America.
Brazil, yeah.
As long as you're paying U.S. taxes.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation, because why would you do that?
Wow.
That's
So here's talking about the economics a little bit about it. Let's just say that this bottle here was bugs in a jug, some micro that he was selling.
Yep.
And it cost $40 an acre. And it gave you a $500 cash return. $1,500, 30% is $500 cash in your pocket. We would be a $1 trillion business, right? Because every farmer would be like, I spend 40 and I get 500 back, a 12-to-1 return. That's pretty much a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially, we'll call it financial fertilizer here. This is a product that most people can take advantage of. They're not aware of it, but it's a massive return to them. And the other thing about it is it's not as such that this is being revenue displaced from the IRS. Because the IRS knows that at the end of the year, Corey's going to go buy 3 tractors that he maybe doesn't need, so he doesn't pay any money in taxes.
Yep.
Right? He's not right. Corey's probably not going to go write a check for $300,000 to the IRS. He's going to do something to defer money, defer income, buy things he maybe doesn't need, so he doesn't pay that. So in this situation, those dollars really aren't probably going to the IRS anyhow, because somebody's going to figure out a way to go tile a farm or do whatever to have those expenses. But in this case, you're already sitting on that deduction. You just haven't tapped into it yet.
Corey, listeners, to Corey's point, would you pay more for a farm if this was already done? Would you, Corey?
That's why I was asking you.
I know,
like,
you're a buyer. And now you got me
if
wondering.
I know it's $2,500 instead of $1,000 or $500, I know there's I know I got a tax credit coming, and B, I know it's a pretty good farm because it's got a buildup of, someone's been taking care of it.
So we should correct that right there. It's tax deduction, just so we don't get people in a tax credit mode.
Not tax credit, but a deduction.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm not a CPA.
So you got to make the money to write it off.
I feel like I'm talking to my father-in-law here, and I had to wait for it to be Dave's idea before it was worth its weight in salt. But it's got to have value.
So it's interesting because we've seen, I think, in agriculture in the last, 10 years, there's kind of a scarcity of land sales, right? There's just not a lot of stuff that trades. And when something trades, if somebody wants it, they buy it because they just want it and it came up. But not very often are people really digging into, like, what is the actual, if it's pattern tiled, it's going to bring more money than if it's not. Or if you're in a cow-calf and it's got a great 5-wire fence on it, it brings more money or not. Well, if you look at it from, as to your point, and we have some folks that call us and say, hey, I've got a farm, I'm going to sell it. I want you to run a report on it. I want to know what that number is because it helps me go to my 5 buyers and say, hey, yeah, you might think you're paying top dollar, but if you pay a little more, you got to figure in all these other things in it. It's a really great tool to help him go sell the next farm and hopefully get an extra $1,000 or $1,500.
You need to have these guys talk right after Mitchell Hora
Yeah.
on the CI score stuff. Just bring them into your luncheon because this
You're
is
gonna blow minds.
Yeah.
And
It's going to have to extend the luncheon and how long it is. Yeah.
Just add dessert.
Go to happy hour.
Yeah. I did add an extra hour for questions.
Oh, nice. Nice.
No, I was just saying, me and Tyler did some stuff down in Texas too. So it's just interesting. We're from Iowa. We don't think of these things, but you buy a $5,000 acre ground in Texas, you got $2,500 of irrigation well pumps. You got another $1,500 of irrigation that goes around in a circle. Then you got fences and stuff. So they're buying it and writing off 95% of that purchase.
Wow. What about if you're not actively...
That's how Farmer Dan 97 does it.
There you go.
Farmer did.
If you're not actively involved farming, say you're just an investor and you invest, then you rent it out, you can do this as well.
So it's a little bit different. You don't get to take the under Section 180 and really falls under somebody actively engaged in farming. That's where you get to take 100% of it in the year of the asset was acquired. So if you're buying it and you're cash renting it out, you still get to take the deduction, but you're not going to take it all in 1 year. You're going to take that as an amortized depletion, essentially, and you're going to roll that out over time.
So if you wanted to do that, you'd probably have to be actively involved. You'd have to maybe have someone custom farm it, and you have to be making some decisions.
So there are some folks, too, that are saying, hey, well, I manage a farm. I co-manage a farm, or it's a crop share situation where I am tied to the performance of the farm and the decisions I make. Then at that point, you're engaged. If you're just buying it and you live in California and you're cash renting it in Iowa, you're not really engaged.
Right.
Now, you can still take it. It's just on a different schedule and in a different way that it gets filed.
So you guys aren't tax accountants, and I'm not either, but my question maybe goes towards this way. If I have another business, which lots of our listeners have other businesses, they're a spraying company,
Well, you have to supplement.
or they
doesn't
build
make money.
puck kits on planters or something like that, but they farm, or they're a drain tile contractor. They're probably making their money over here as a drain tile contractor, and they're making enough money they want to buy more farm ground.
Comes off your AGI.
That's what I'm wondering.
does.
Or does it come off? Yeah.
Comes off your AGI.
I didn't know if it just came off farming or if it came off the total aggressive.
It's all going to roll up. If they've got different entities, it's going to roll up through their memberships or their partnerships to them. So it's going to come off your AGI.
So for even companies that are buying farmland,
Yep.
It's called throwing good money after bad. To supplement
exactly
your,
what it is.
supplement your
It's
habit.
like show cattle.
Just like show cattle.
I love it. I'm going to do whatever I can to keep on doing it.
So surely we didn't ask you every question that you've ever been asked. What question are we missing that maybe a naysayer that's listening right now would ask you?
Or if you can't think of one, if we do have a naysayer, how do they ask you?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can go on our website, contact us. Information's there. I think in general, we covered a lot of like, hey, this is how it works. This is why it works. When you think about, I always think that example of the $500,000 tractor that you can write off and bonus depreciate, which people in ag know, and that's very common. Because they'll be like, how could I write off the fertility? That's crazy. And I'm like, I can write off a tractor. On paper, it's worth nothing, which we all know it is. So when people say, well, I just took a $1,500 deduction on my farm, those nutrients weren't depleted. They're still there. That's right. Well, your tractor worth $500,000 is still worth $500,000 if you go out and sell it tomorrow. It's still there. But over time, that tractor would get beat down and worth nothing. Mm-hmm. Especially if you get hydraulic oil in the cab or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Or it works the other way. You don't use it, it appreciates, and you pay the capital gains tax like land.
Right.
It not usually happen that way, but
What
Unless
about
you're on a 4455 or
yeah.
I just thought about one other question. So a lot of times I have clients that want to sell in year 2023 and because they want to get it on that tax year versus 2024. Is there any year stipulations that they bought it in 23 and now they're filing taxes? Can they file it in 24 or
It's the tax year is going to be filed to the tax year the asset was acquired.
it is? So if they bought it at December 30th,
However, if you bought it in 2012, you're not filing in 2012 because you can't amend and go back to 2012. You're pulling that all the way forward.
you just can't 100%
through
depreciate
your
it.
missed depreciation.
Okay.
nice.
Yeah, I think the one message to people that are having a little, or the naysayers you'd say, is go talk to your accountant, Google it. You can read all about it. You read the tax code. And that's usually where we start. And the accountants, I'll tell you, they'll come back and say that can't be true. And they go do some research. They call us. We walk them through it. And we have a pretty good rapport in building that out. So I think it's doing your own research, going to your own trusted specialist, and really pushing them to do that research on it.
So listeners, Boa Safra is helping me with the farm purchase I just made on my farm, and I am halfway through the process. And so when they came out, one cool thing I thought is another pod that we did a podcast on the soil probe. And Crystal Labs had that really sweet soil probe, and the guy that came out to actually do the soil sample was using the soil probe. So I was geeking out on the data that he was getting. I'm like, this is instant, like instantaneous. So it's amazing how fast that came back in an email that here's your soil sample because they were using that new technology soil probe as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys use that on everything?
On a lot. And the reason is we have done a massive amount of testing versus wet labs or like a soil probe, for example. And you can take the same soil test and send it to 5 different labs, and the variability it's astonishing. And we I don't know. I'm sure there's other groups that pull a lot of soil tests in a year, but we pull a lot. Mm-hmm. Probably.
And it GPS locates every one of them,
Yes.
so you guys can always go back.
Always.
Yeah.
But what I would argue is we probably pull as many as probably any company in the country. And when we take that data against where we do calibration tests often and we send 5 different labs plus what our data, we always are so much more consistent in the middle of the road. Where we'll have one lab over here and one lab over here. We're always pretty much right down the center. So that's why we use it, is we have found it to be more consistent and fast. We want it fast. We got the data. We got the georeference pins.
And that's the point. You want defendable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Defendability.
Awesome. Well, that's about the time we have for this episode today. People are going to be curious. They're going to reach out to you. You said go to the website. Yeah, so that's good. They can go to boasafraag.com. They can also go to our website. It'll also be in our show notes because we'll make sure we put all this data out there for our listeners on this episode. I think the summary and the challenge is pretty clear. Mm-hmm. The challenge is ask your CPA. Bryce already said it. Is call, get the conversation started, and see if this is something that you can take advantage of. We appreciate you guys taking the time. Obviously, you drove over here because you felt this was an important message for our audience to listen to. I can't wait to get to know both of you a little bit better, but for this time being, guys, I'm going to tell our listeners thanks for listening, and we hope they tune in next time.
I'd say one more thing, and it's harvest the hidden value.
I like
Good
it.
harvest, Boa Safra.
There you go.
There you go.
Good harvest.
Got it.
That's it.
That's a wrap.